for the worst technological disaster in
Supreme
history
Court refuses
have been
place for
released
tougher
on bail
sentences
after
for
a
those
court
responsible for the world's worst industrial disaster.
Bhopal can get justice and their life of dignity.
Your thoughts 25 years later, do you feel that same sense of anger?
On December 3, 1984, a chemical leak of methyl isocyanate broke loose from a chemical plant in the poor region of Bhopal, India, killing thousands and injuring more than 100,000 people. This became known as the Bhopal Disaster, the largest industrial disaster in world history. In this landmark event, the rights of companies to make a profit in a free market were put above their responsibilities to take care of workers and the surrounded area. The government's lack of responsibility for proper oversight of the companies in their jurisdiction contributed to a lack of safety. In the wake of the disaster, Union Carbide chose to ignore the rights of the Indian people, leading to a series of investigations and a failing 27-year lawsuit mismanaged by the Indian government that led to a small settlement for the Indian people. There has been little reform in corporate environmental strategy, while the suffering in Bhopal continues. Established in 1917, Union Carbide became one of the leading companies in the field of mining and chemical production. Union Carbide's long history of negligence began in 1934 in the U.S. The company showed a lack of responsibility during the construction of the Hawks Nest Tunnel in West Virginia. Between 400 and 700 workers died from silicosis due to the lack of safety equipment. This was one of the worst industrial disasters in U.S. history because many workers thought they had no rights in the situation. Few pressed charges. Union Carbide settled, however they thought they vindicated themselves by claiming no responsibility for silicosis. Even with safety programs in place, Union Carbide's plants continued having accidents. During the 1950s at the Oak Ridge site in Tennessee, 475,000 pounds of mercury spilled, contaminating the site and causing kidney failure among workers. Faced with continual media attacks and workers' rights organizations, new chemical plant laws passed by the Environmental Protection Agency, and more lawsuits, Union Carbide decided to outsource the majority of their company in the following years. One of the outsourced companies was Union Carbide India Limited, a subsidiary of the company to handle Indian affairs in the poor city of Bhopal, India. After 4 years of construction, a plant opened in 1974, hoping to save the struggling city with opportunities of employment. More importantly, they hoped to end crop seasons ruined by pests. They planned to open a plant that would produce an insecticide known as Savin and would provide sustainable agriculture to the people of Bhopal and improve their economy and health. The executives of Union Carbide were excited to both improve the welfare of the people but also benefit economically, as they would make millions selling to the farmers of India. Union Carbide redrew the rules with Union Carbide India Limited after the Indian government objected to foreign companies having complete control over the outsourced industry. They chose to make Union Carbide India Limited, or UCIL, owned by the Indian government. The subsidiary was responsible for the rights of the Indian workers. Union Carbide kept the remaining 51% in their control. In India, an economic collapse in 1981, coupled with terrible social conditions, left farmers unable to afford pesticides for their crops. This made people more dependent on work provided by the plant, and the Indian government overlooked a series of municipal code violations to keep the company running. The economic problems also hurt the company financially and brought into question whether they could sustain their profit overseas. The election of Ronald Reagan in the U.S. in 1980 allowed Congress to pass the Free Trade Agreement and freed Union Carbide from some of their responsibilities for their workers overseas. These included the windfall profits tax, which cut taxes for oil and chemical producers, as well as partial deregulation of overseas companies. Forced to make budget cuts, reductions included cuts to manual overrides from standard electronic safety features and the use of cheaper safety equipment. Union Carbide, as well as the Indian government, exchanged American personnel for Indian workers who, although were unskilled, were able to work for less money than their U.S. counterparts, which benefited both government and company alike. They also switched to an unsafe 40-ton storage tank. If a leak did occur, it would be much more devastating. On December 2nd, a piece of vital safety equipment that scrubbed the toxic gases had been turned off, and the refrigeration unit was shut off to save money. Towers to burn off excess gas were under repair.
Panic spread and thousands started fleeing their homes. The hospitals in Bhopal have been overwhelmed by patients numbering at least 10,000.
Crowds of thousands were evacuated. Children, lower to the ground and further exposed to the gases, collapsed and were trampled to death. Hospitals were seeing 17,000 people a day. Within 2 days, all of the vegetation in the area had died. Soon, protests began, gaining their greatest support from women demanding their right to medical treatment, and demanding the jailing of Carbide CEO Warren Anderson. News didn't reach the U.S. until 24 hours later. Reports had missing and misconstrued information. Worst of all, Union Carbide denied that the disaster happened. However, after admitting the catastrophe did occur, Warren Anderson spoke at a news conference where he apologized.
That I am confident that the victims can be fairly and equitably compensated without a material adverse effect on the financial condition of Union Carbide Corporation.
Unfortunately, this apology only focused on responsibility for the financial loss. Still, stocks remained stable, and Union Carbide continued to make a profit. By January 1985, the Indian government-run Union Carbide India Limited investigation had started. The U.S. government and Union Carbide also started investigating the accident. All parties were blaming others for the disaster. Union Carbide ruled that this was an act of sabotage and also placed responsibility on the Indian government for maintaining safety requirements. They also said that if Union Carbide India Limited had followed procedures, workers could have prevented the disaster. The Indian government claimed that UCIL was to blame, as the government couldn't blame the corporation directly because Union Carbide was essential to the Indian economy. The subsidiary blamed Union Carbide for not providing adequate safety equipment. The U.S. government avoided this confrontation by focusing only on the disaster. Union Carbide dodged claims by saying, "Safety is the responsibility of the people who operate our plants. You can't be there day in and day out." CEO Warren Anderson. Anderson traveled to India to represent his company and was placed in an Indian prison. However, his company got him released on bail immediately and he returned to the U.S. He never went back to India, further enraging the victims. The dodging of legal liability lasted for years as the suffering in Bhopal continued. The Indian government, after giving up hope that Union Carbide would take responsibility, claimed that the rights of their people were being denied. The Indian government launched a lawsuit and took Union Carbide to court. The lawsuit quickly moved into a federal court in New York to benefit both the Indian government and Union Carbide. Then, the Indian government pooled all cases into one massive case, regardless of the damages caused. Only after the lawsuit, beginning in 1985, did stocks in Union Carbide drop dramatically. In court, Union Carbide argued that although they had a moral responsibility, it was ultimately the workers' job to stop the disaster. The Indians are very technically capable, but for safety procedures, U.S. multinationals should insist on having American employees, said Warren Anderson, trying to place blame on the workers. In 1989, the lawsuit in the U.S. moved back to the Provincial State Court of Madhya Pradesh. Union Carbide was required to pay $470 million after damages were estimated at over $3 billion, less than $500 given to each Indian injured. This was not enough to cover medical bills of victims, and for most, not even pay for medicine they would permanently need. Union Carbide was purchased by Dow Chemical, another large chemical company. They refused to negotiate any further rehabilitation, but spent millions trying to improve their image after purchasing Carbide. New ownership sparked a series of lawsuits for the victims, again in the U.S. At the end of these trials, 7 top executives were sentenced to only 2 years on counts of manslaughter. Unfortunately, this happened in 2010, years too late to have a direct impact. In 2012, the U.S. government ruled that Union Carbide and its employees were no longer responsible for any damages. This ended the work of activists who had been working for decades, many in their 80s. Since the start of the disaster, they had been protesting for actions that were now unfairly settled. Because of free trade agreements, both governments and companies continue to operate in the same manner, as long as they are able to still maintain a profit. But in Bhopal, struggles with public health continue to affect the city.
Every system of the body has been affected. 40% of the women coming here under 40 have menopause.
Water pollution is bad enough to corrode pots, and subsistence farming continues on the land directly next to the old plant. With one of the highest deformity rates in history, the city will continue to suffer for generations to come. Throughout history, there has never been an industrial catastrophe as damaging as the Bhopal disaster. Showing the moral implications of governments giving companies complete social and economic freedom while neglecting the population's rights, the Bhopal disaster still lingers as a cry for reform and corporate responsibility.
Products of Union Carbide.